What's happening, people? Back with another reaction, back with some more J-drama score, and we're going back to the show Okitegami Kyoko's Memorandum. This is a show I've described a few times, so I won't spend too long on it, but it's a show about a detective who had a traumatic incident and has a brain condition where every time she sleeps, newly acquired memories evaporate from her brain. So she has to essentially learn her surroundings and the people in her life anew every day. Now she has a habit of writing on herself, as you can see in the picture, and that's how she sort of, quickly, when she wakes up in the morning, assesses, okay, this is who I am. And indeed, you eventually find out on the ceiling of her room, it shows her name and that she's a detective, but the question is, who wrote that there? So yeah, there's a fascinating sort of story that unfolds with the main detective character. It's also, as I mentioned, sort of like 50 First Dates, in that eventually a very unlucky man, played by Okada Masaki, he comes into her life and he is sort of taken with her and impressed with her and her reasoning ability and so on, but he's also kind of worried because he sees the potential for her to be manipulated. The very first case where she, indirectly but helpfully proves his innocence in terms of he's accused of something at his work. During the course of that investigation, someone drugs Kyoko's coffee and she falls asleep. And then when she wakes up, she's like, what am I doing here? And they have to explain to her, oh, you were hired to do this, but you fell asleep. And so she has to start the case again. And so very early on, he sees the danger and the potential for her to be manipulated, and he's concerned for her. And over the course of I think it's 11 episodes, a beginning sentiment of romance begins to emerge, but it's hard to date someone if they forget who you are every time they go to sleep. And eventually, though, because of his actions and despite how unlucky he is, his desire to prevent other people from being wrongfully blamed, he's like a really good person, she eventually writes on her arm, I can trust Yasukusuke. And so, then she wakes up thinking that, but who is this guy? So she comes downstairs the next time and she's looking around at the cafe, like who is, and the people in the room or the people that sort of help take care of her realize, oh, she must have written something on her arm. So there's a lot going on with her character. And then I mentioned, each episode she'll help solve something, and it's through her observational skills and her reason skills and so on. But she's the perfect detective to hire if it's sort of a case that you don't want a lot of people talking about, because by the time she wakes up the next day, she won't remember it, so she's not going to tell anyone. But yeah, over the course of the show, it goes from being very funny and silly to still funny and silly in moments, but increasingly emotional, and that not only applies to the increasing romance possibility between the main two characters, but over the course of the show, it's like the individual cases tend to get more emotional. There's one near the end that really moves me. There's a couple, in fact, but one especially. And it's about this novelist who wrote a series of novels, and then there's seemingly these 6 novels that don't fit into any other series, and then the novelist dies while he's working on the last one, and so everyone's trying to figure out, is this part of this non-serial, whatever, and she eventually figures it out, and when they figure out what the explanation behind those books is, it's tremendously moving. So yeah, even the episodes, the cases that she ends up working on, kind of get a little more serious as the show goes along. And the reason I mention that is because this tune, which is the final track on the soundtrack, seen here, and again, I had to look up the titles for all the tracks because they're all in kanji and hiragana here. And katakana as well, which means in the cases of katakana, you might as well be written in English or another language, because you use katakana to write foreign words in Japanese. Regardless, the soundtrack is done by 2 people who are conveniently shown here. We're going to listen to a tune by the female composer, whose name is Megumi Sasano, or Sasano Megumi. And she did the final tune on the soundtrack, as I mentioned, which is called, I want to make sure I get this right. And so yeah, the title in English, translated, is Wake Up and Be Strong. I'm a person who can handle even breathing. And again, wake up and be strong. I was just describing her sort of unique condition with her memory and sort of the way that she has to figure out the world each day anew, which no one really thinks about. The only one who thinks about that, of course, is the male character, Yakusuke, and he basically recognizes, again, not only that she's vulnerable, but that she has to work really hard, even before she starts working as a detective. Everyone else is like, oh, can we hire her? Oh, and then how do we make sure she doesn't talk about this and whatever. But he's kind of the only one looking out for her, and indeed, every day that she wakes up, she has to figure everything out, and it's partially based on notes, including one or two that maybe she didn't write, and if she didn't write it, well then, like, who's defining her, like, in her brain, like, or like on the wall or on the ceiling. So yeah, this tune, again, wake up and be strong, I'm a person who can handle even breathing. It gets at sort of the delicacy, the potential danger. Like, it's an emotional tune, but it's also, there's a bit of uncertainty to it. There's a bit of like emotional depth, but like not necessarily positive. It's like the absolute value of the emotion is significant, but it's not clear exactly how it's going to play out. So I think it fits very much with her character and the narrative overall. So let's get it. This is Sasano Megumi, or Megumi Sasano, and the tune translated into English is "Wake up and be strong, I'm a person who can handle even breathing." a sonically gorgeous piece, whether it was the piano, which there were moments where it was more, sort of guiding the melody at the end. It was almost like a pulse, or the woodwinds. I believe there was an oboe in there. The strings, not only the sort of sweeping, moving strings, but that sort of steady backbone, that sort of tension string. Just beautiful. I really do love that piece. It was making me think about the more emotional moments in the series, not only between the main two characters, as I said, but there are times in the latter half of the show. I don't think that track is used maybe in the first couple episodes. If it is, it's very brief. It definitely comes to the fore more as the show moves along. And again, not only in relation to the waking up of and the sort of vulnerability of the main character Kyoko, but even in a couple moments where, we're sort of getting some detail about the incidental cases, like episode to episode. Yeah, and it's definitely a very emotional tune the way it's used in the show, which makes sense. I think it's very sonically emotional and rich. But yeah, bottom line, shout out to Megumi Sasano, a brilliant tune. I really do enjoy it. More from the soundtrack to come. Again, when I talk about these shows, I feel like, each time I start a reaction, I don't want to rehash what I've said, but then I think about a different episode and I end up talking more. So hopefully me talking about the shows isn't too annoying. But shout out to those of you, especially Ron. But there's a couple others. I've noticed there's a few videos that have gotten 3 and 4 likes, which, I know this is going to be a smaller follower playlist, but I very much enjoy Japanese drama. I'm excited to talk about the music, and indeed one of the things I love about a lot of the shows that I've watched is they have great scores. So more from this show to come. Do let me know what you think. I will see you next time.